Welcome to the AI and Data Governance Podcast with Dr. Vega. We are here to explore the cutting edge AI and data innovations shaping the future of the electric utility industry. I am your host, Rolando Vega, and I have the exceptional privilege to have someone really special here with us today. We're currently in Portland, Oregon, visiting my friend John Kochavatr, CIO at Portland General Electric. And today we'll be discussing not only some of PGE's key accomplishments, but also gaining insight into how Mr. Kochavatr is shaping the information workforce of the future. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rolando. Great to be here.
Well, let's start, kind of defining a little bit of a foundation for some of the key highlights that I see from, an independent perspective, of who is Portland General Electric, so that our audience gets a little bit of an exposure to that. It's about 3,000 people, 3,000 employees that you guys have at Portland General Electric, serving over 930,000 customers, 1.9 how they call it, Oregonians.
That's
1.9 million Oregonians, as they call them. And something that's quite impressive to me, which maybe I'll ask you a little bit later to tell me more about this, is that you're the number one voluntary renewable energy program in the country, which is, that in its own could be its own podcast. It requires quite clear vision, leadership, and effective governance and data-driven decision-making for something like this to happen. It doesn't happen by chance. But that impressed me. It also is very interesting as being someone that worked in the utility industry within market operations, buying and selling electricity in the ERCOT market in Texas. You guys are headed here very shortly in 2026 to participate in the California ISO, the Independent System Operator, Extended Day Ahead Market, which to me is quite exciting. Because I could see firsthand before, when you get to participate, you can really make significant economic impact to your customer base. And I did my homework, and you guys have such a rich history on how you lead the way on the transmission system back to when you were founded 1888 and 1889. You had one of the longest transmission corridors. When I looked at this in the map, I was thinking, okay, this must be a corridor that goes all the way from Oregon to California. But it was 15 miles, to a city. I forget the name of the city, south of here.
Yeah, Willamette Falls, outside of Oregon City.
Yes, there you go. And so now you're doing deals, across all of the states in the area, and the deals that you're making involve, transmission interconnection of multiple states, 450 plus miles, not 15. I mean, how times have changed, 130 plus years ago. And so that's exciting. You have been a leader in transmission systems. You're now participating in exchanging energy, being more coordinated, days ahead, so that you're not just reacting to the real-time market. And another thing that stuck out to me is your success rate at getting grants, federal grants. I looked at one of your financial releases recently, and I saw that last year you guys submitted 16 proposals. I mean, not many utilities send, let's say, 2, 3. No, you went all the way to 16 proposals that you submitted, out of which you got awarded 8. There must be something special about your communities in this area, this part of the country, and also how your workforce operates that make that a reality. And I'm really curious in a moment here how all of this comes together for you. And so here we go. That's a little bit of the things that impressed me about Portland General Electric. Now, John, I want to hear your reflections. Why have you chosen Portland General Electric, and what makes this place, something that you can call home?
Yeah, so Rolando, you did do your research, so I'm quite impressed. There's a lot in there that we can unpack. But I'll start with, why I chose Portland General Electric, and just some background on me. I joined the company in 2018. And part of my reasoning was because in my past life, I worked for General Electric for 16 and a half years. And that business was mainly B2B, right? Business to business. And I was really inspired with the idea of working in a business to consumer organization. But in the utility space, as you well know, it's quite complex, and I think it's quite rewarding to be at the nexus of energy policy, social policy, environmental policy, economic policy, and to be able to do that in a place where you have to serve everybody. I think I found that quite inspiring, right? We can't, let's say, discriminate on who we sell stuff to. We're selling to everybody, and we have to, create an environment and mechanisms to be able to serve, our community of over 2 million people. And so, for me, that has been probably the most rewarding thing.
Mm. So as we look at your career progression and development, can you maybe walk us through your journey? So you mentioned 2018 is when you joined
Yes.
Portland General Electric. What did you go through before you could, just knock on the door, or somebody knocked on your door and said, "Hey, how about Portland General Electric?" Walk us through that journey.
Yeah, well, I'll take you way back. So I grew up in Southern California, and I went to school in Los Angeles. Didn't know what I wanted to do, just kind of floating around. I did some different majors ranging from communication studies to history to political science and sociology. I did a couple of internships, and one day I was messing around with a computer, Windows 3.1, for those that remember what that is, and I broke it. I changed the configuration. I broke it. I was freaking out because it was a school computer. I spent like 2 hours messing around with it, and ultimately I fixed it. And that was kind of the inspiration for me. And so on a subsequent internship, I asked if I could switch to information technology, for which the university said, yeah, that'd be great. And so they put me into an IT internship role. I did that for, I think, probably 3 or 6 months. The internship was over, but I loved it so much, I asked my boss if I could continue. And they said, we don't have budget for it. I said, it was okay, I'll work for free. So I worked for free for another couple of months, and then they found some budget, and I kept doing it. And so that was really kind of my first job, because then they offered me a role after I graduated, for which I readily accepted, did that for a year, and then I got offered another position to work with a vice chancellor who had gone to start up an online education company. So I did that for a couple of years. Then I joined another startup in LA doing supply chain work. And then after that, I wanted to work with the best people, because I think for me, if any of your listeners or yourself have done sports, people that are better than you just make you better. Yeah. And so at the time, I think the best leadership program was at General Electric. And so I joined GE and moved from sunny California to upstate New York. And so my GE career took me from upstate New York with the Power Systems division to Overland Park, Kansas to work with GE Capital. And then I went to Atlanta, Georgia to work with GE Infrastructure, which was power, oil and gas, aviation, transportation, which was a locomotive business. Then I went from there to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania to work in the water and distributed power business. And then I got recruited to come to Portland General Electric in 2018. So it's been an incredible run.
Wow. So from having the spark of being able to fix, the Windows machine that, you messed up, to fixing and having the pleasure of seeing the result of your focus and determination to fix it, to then transitioning to IT internship roles that got you more into the IT universe, but then you made a transition there. I don't know if I should say a transition, but leadership. Then the topic of leadership was calling your attention. What was it, between being a technical problem solver, then you said,
Yeah.
hey, I don't want to just code. I don't want to just, click around in the computer. I want to have a different kind of impact. What was it?
Yeah, no, I love that question, Rolando. So something that I've come to be proud of is that I don't have a technical degree. So when I was in college, I was toward the end, I was a double major, political science and sociology. After I did that internship, though, I wanted the fastest path out of school, so I finished with a sociology degree. And then ultimately, when I went to graduate school or business school, my focus was on strategic management and economics. And so there's a lot of people that are maybe surprised that, hey, you're leading technology, for this investor-owned utility, and you don't have a technical degree. So for me, I think the inspiration for leadership was wanting to make a larger impact, I think, in the organizations that I've been a part of. And I have this whole conversation with people around when people want to be managers. Why do you want to be a manager? Because you've got to work with employees that are not happy with their compensation, and there's too much work, and why would you do that, right? But I think my focus has been on sort of the bigger mission, right? And I think for me at Portland General Electric, I think about our decarbonization mission, our ability to serve customers, being progressive and innovative to deliver more value for customers, and to be a model for how we can decarbonize, the environment around us.
In a moment, I want to dive into your key role models. Before we go there, you did mention you were interested in the bigger mission, and as I looked at my mental Rolodex of all of the people I know and I have known in utilities, whether is the field operators and the field technicians, or the people back in the office, or whether it's HR or the supply chain people. So a lot of faces came to my mind, and you mentioned there was a moment where you wanted to focus on the bigger mission. Can you maybe expand a little bit more about the importance of that? Maybe not just from the perspective of, hey, I want to go to become a manager, or I want to become an executive at the utility, because there is some significant value in understanding the bigger mission at all levels.
Yeah.
Can you maybe help me explore that a little more?
Yeah. Well, so if I think about the work that we're doing, that I get to do at Portland General Electric, which is a privilege, let me kind of take you through that transition from a GE to a PGE, because I was with GE for so long. There was a tagline when I was at GE at the time that said something like, we power, we move, and we cure. I'm sure I didn't get that in the right order, but for me, in the work that I did, at GE, our customers were largely countries, and I was really inspired in working in that infrastructure space to see what the impact of infrastructure would have on a community. And I don't mean just, a community like a neighborhood. I mean, yes, that, and entire countries. And so countries would buy power generation equipment. They would buy aircraft engines that would go onto airplanes in order to build economies. And it wasn't just about building the economies, but let's unpack that even further. It's about elevating people's quality of lives. And I think for me, I found that incredibly inspiring. And to be able to do that, at an electric utility like PGE, to work, I would say, on the forefront of innovation, to push the envelope, to make that affordable for the residents, for the Oregonians, as you mentioned, for our Oregonians, as you mentioned earlier. Like, to me, that's what gets me up in the morning.
That's exciting. It's also what gets me up in the morning. And I think, this is a good moment to, a call to action, actually, to anyone who is listening to us, because not only is a common denominator on what drives us on Sunday when we're thinking about, what are we going to be working on tomorrow with our people, there is a significant element of it seems that your drive, your motivation in walking the steps of what you're doing down to the very essence of what we're changing, what we're improving in people's lives. And I would say that the call to action is for anyone in the utility industry, no matter where in the electric utility company they are in the organization. This is tremendously invigorating, and it really provides the energy that we need, to provide the energy to the people. So thank you for sharing that.
Pun intended, right?
Yeah, right. That's exciting. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that perspective.
And maybe one other thing that I would say, Rolando, on that is that I think, and maybe this just has come with my age, but I think many of us want to be part of something that's bigger than any one individual. And I think the best of us are inspired by, joining, that mission, whether it's to elevate the quality of lives for individuals or, some of your listeners that might be in healthcare, anything that anybody does. I think where we can sort of be part of something bigger, I think is quite inspiring.
Yeah, and it's interesting we're having this conversation now because we're gonna dive into AI and data governance here shortly, and many people like to think that AI and data is just about technology and data, and we forget the component of people, but people is at the center of all of this conversation. So let's go to role models. Who has helped shape that framework for life that you have?
Yeah, boy, I think there are so many. Of course, many of us look to our parents as sort of role models. I think as I've sort of come up, I mentioned that I went to go work for a former vice chancellor at UCLA, which is where I went to undergraduate. Lots of phenomenal advice that I got from him. His name is John Kochavatr, and I think there's just so many people that we all run into throughout the course of our lives, in personal lives and our careers, that inspire us, and all of that, those ingredients, allow us to become who we are, today. So, gosh, there's too many to sort of name. My wife, my kids. I think all of that gets all of us thinking differently about, what our contributions can be to the people around us and to the, to the world around us. Yeah.
I have to say, John, this is the first time I have somewhat of that response, and I wanna reflect on it for a moment, because even as I think of every question that I ask, I at least give myself an attempt to providing what I would answer to the question. And so, I intended the question to be, who are maybe your top 2 or top 3 role models, but let me maybe unpack these. Your answer, it's an interesting answer from the perspective that your struggle to identify your role models, you didn't naturally gravitate to pointing out, the 2 or 3. You did mention, John Kochavatr, yes. But immediately after that, it kind of, in a way, fell apart because you have so many that have contributed to your development. And I think that there is something deep about that, because it shows that there is this constant mode of learning that is not attached to a position or a title, to the people that have been significant role models for you. And I think that is, a profound thing, that you genuinely navigated or gravitated to. Let's recognize all of the people that have made, the little incremental, improvements in your own life. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I would add to that also that, I think we learn from every person and every experience that we have, and not to, make this too sort of deep, but, there's experiences that all of us have that probably aren't the best, that some might even call negative, right? But at least, you learn from that and you say, well, okay, I don't want to be like that. And I think that's we shouldn't discount those things, right? Because we all run into sort of challenges in our lives. You're like, I wish that didn't happen to me. But then you become a better person because of it. And so, there's lots of people that I'm sure all of us could reflect on it and say, oh man, that wasn't the best experience, but I learned, this from that experience, and it's made me a better leader, a better father, a better human being.
Mm. Absolutely, that's exciting to hear and refreshing. Let's go now into the AI data, the digital world. In your role, you not only have had the opportunity to work with some amazing people, you have heard their perspectives, their ideas. You have come with some of your own perspectives and ideas that you would like to see, materialize in the company. There are kind of two angles to this question, and one, I kind of like to split it in the great things and the greater things, and you just touch on these, the elements of, where maybe you have not the best experience, but you actually have quite a bit of learning from that experience. That is the second one. I want to finish with that one, that I call the greater things. Let's just start with maybe the great things. What are some of those great accomplishments or initiatives that you have had the opportunity to lead, and to partner with with other folks in the organization to kind of push forward, and these are kind of the happy moments, right? You had this in your mind, or your people had this in their mind, and you either said let's do it, and it kind of turned out to be what you wanted it to be, and then later we'll dive into, we wanted this, but it didn't quite go the way we wanted.
Yeah, gosh, I think that. So I'll do it in the context of what we've done at PGE.
Mm-hmm.
If I think back to 2019, 2020 timeframe, so I'd been here for, probably a couple of years at the time. There were some significant wildfires down in California.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, Rolando, I mean, when something happens to one utility someplace that's of significance,
Yeah.
everybody knows about it.
Yeah.
And we really focus on addressing some of those issues. One of the issues that had happened down in California was they had these wildfires. They turned the power off with the public safety power shut off. And then all of these customers started calling into the utility, and their systems weren't able to handle the volume of calls that came in. So one of the things that I'm really proud of, and it wasn't so much the project, although I am very proud of that, it's how we were able to marshal the right urgency and velocity to get this project done, where we moved our website entirely to the cloud. All of the back-end systems went up to the cloud as well. And then wouldn't you know it, we launched this in August of 2020, and then we had our first public safety power shut off in the history of the company in September of 2020. And of course, we saw volumes of calls that came in because wildfires were happening in our service territory as well. And so I'm really proud of how quickly our team was able to organize to get this done. So yes, I'm proud of the project, but I'm more proud that we tapped into that innovation that you talked about earlier of the company to make this happen. And since then, we've moved with a lot higher velocity in the work that we've done to serve customers. So for example, last year, we implemented both an ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning System, as well as a new customer information system. It's hard enough to do one of those in a year, but we did both in a year. And to be able to do that, to say yes to doing that, and to deliver it with as high a quality as we've done, I'm really proud of the team from that perspective. But I will tell you the thing that I am most proud of, that I've had the privilege to work on here at PGE, is the development of a couple of leadership programs. Because I think that leadership and the durability of leadership through programs like the LEAP program that we've created, which is Leadership Excellence and Acceleration Program, the Power Pathways program, which is for early career individuals that maybe have no IT experience. We can build that bench strength. Through programs like that, I think we create a durability for the company that I have learned earlier in my career, And that has been, I think, phenomenal with regard to being a springboard for so much of our talent to become strong leaders in the organization and in the industry.
Wow, there is so much to unpack there, and it's like, we're gonna have to have a part two to this podcast. we have these. Let me clarify something on the power shutoff that happened that September. This was not a test.
Oh, this was real. It was the
This
first time in the history of Portland General Electric we did a public safety power shutoff, and we figured it out along the way, right? Because you have communities that now have been de-energized deliberately, right, on the part of the utility in order to protect life, safety, and property. And I think we've done a second one since in 2022, and we've learned so much from the industry and best practices that is now in our back pocket for the future, because we've seen the extreme weather, and we've seen what the risks are when we don't de-energize in this industry.
You mentioned urgency and velocity. Those two words typically are not, at least in my mind, in the common lexicon of utilities. Gosh, I mean, where do we start to make that to be the common behavior that we see in utilities? You mentioned the ERP and the CIS system. I'm assuming the implementation took place 1 year. How long was it for the planning, of the ERP and the CIS?
Yeah, so for those two systems, it was about 18 months from start to finish for both the CIS as well
including
as
the planning.
ERP, including the planning.
Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
But I thought I'd just maybe add, as we think about urgency and velocity in the world that we're in now, and Rolando, you probably saw this, at CPS. There is no better time to be in the energy industry right now.
Oh yeah,
man. I think about the largest source of load growth for us, like many utilities, is data centers.
yeah.
So this is a great convergence with the AI conversation that we're having,
Right.
because we're trying to train all of these models that are going to be operating and that are be driven by these, GPUs, the graphical processing units that use significantly more energy. So the gating factor right now for data center growth is energy. I'm a markets guy. I told you I studied strategic management and economics in graduate school. The market will take care of itself. And so if we don't operate, we as a utility don't operate with the urgency and the velocity to serve customers, customers will find an alternate path. So I think that the market dynamics right now are forcing virtually every utility to operate with much higher urgency and velocity to serve customers. And that means adopting new technologies. It means, I think, reorganizing in a way to serve customers in a much more reliable way. So, as I think about what the challenges are for the utility, there's a couple of models that many of your listeners will know. One is the trilemma that many people have described as sort of managing reliability. Two is around affordability, and three is around clean, right? This clean energy. And so the adage would go that, hey, look, I can do two of those, but doing all three is really difficult, right? And so example would be, well, look, I can give you reliable and clean energy,
Right.
but it's going to be expensive, right? Or,
Yeah.
hey, look, I can make it affordable and I can make it clean because we can build a bunch of wind turbines everywhere. But because the wind doesn't always blow or the sun doesn't always shine, I might have to sacrifice reliability. So I think that's one model that we consider. And then the other model that we look at is kind of what I've described as sort of the iron triangle, which is customer prices. Think about that at kind of the top of the triangle. And then we've got company operations, and then we've got shareholder or owner returns. And that's a tough one because you say, well, look, I want to increase my O&M, which is operations and maintenance costs, or my capital to go build all of this stuff in order to support that trilemma. Okay, well, we can do that. But on the iron triangle, what does that mean for customer prices, and or what does it mean for shareholder returns? And a lot of people would say, well, who cares about the shareholder, right? But the investor-owned utility model relies on shareholder monies, right? Those dollars that come in from an equity perspective to help fund the reliability, the affordability, and the clean energy. And that's just the construct. And I've talked to my wife about this, and she's like, oh gosh, well, a lot of people would say you should just municipalize, right?
Okay.
Or go to a PUD, a public utility district for your listeners. And what you could do that, but then how are you going to be able to afford to maintain the system if you don't have equity that's coming in from investors? And that's a challenge because there's so many things that are happening in our industry today. We talked about wildfires. We got to deal with that. We talked about extreme weather that's out there. And so that affects reliability because we've seen kind of what happened in Texas, right? Where, oh my gosh, the gas lines froze up or the wind turbines froze. Well, it takes investment, right, in order to create a higher level of reliability. Anyway, so those are part of the mechanics, I think, that I and so many leaders in the industry are thinking about balancing for customers.
Can you maybe use the same tools to help explain, how you got to be the number one for renewable energy, voluntary renewable energy adoption? Because, it's not just that you're number one in renewable energy. A utility can push down the throat, the renewable energy to their customers, but to be voluntary is what makes it special for me.
Yeah, and so I'm really proud of our customers. I think this is probably less of a PGE story and more of an Oregonian story. We've been the number one voluntary renewable program for 14 years in a row. And I think that really says something about the ethos of Oregonians, especially those that are in the Portland General Electric service territory. And to me, it means that we've got individuals that are voluntarily paying more money for clean energy because they believe in it. Right. Yeah. It's one thing for people to say they want clean energy, but it's something altogether different when they put their proverbial money where their mouth is. And I couldn't be more proud to be in an Oregonian and in a service territory where people care enough, to pay extra for that clean energy. And this is not the largest just by percentage terms or whole terms. It's both, and I think that really says something.
Fascinating. As we look at the great things that you guys have been working on, can we dive into some of the greater things and maybe as you reflect on what examples to share, could you provide some color in regards to the data, the relevance of data to inform those use cases, so to say, and maybe even some of the artificial intelligence, that Portland General Electric is beginning to include in your natural processes.
Yeah, boy, there's a lot in that, Rolando. So when you say the greater things, and you tell me, I'm thinking these are the things that haven't necessarily gone so well, right, for us, because we often learn more from our failures than we do our successes, right? I think one of the things that come to mind for me is we had an ice storm here in the Portland General Electric service territory this past January. And by the way, the last ice storm that we had was in February of 2021, I think it was, and that was supposed to be a once in 40-year event.
Hey, right? It aligns with the Texas
exactly
winter storm.
No,
yes.
it exactly happened in February of 2021, along with Texas. So,
okay.
And on the national news, I think Texas got a lot more attention than we did here.
I'm sure we
Oregon.
did.
But I will tell you, one of my big learnings from this most recent January storm is we can put as much technology out there, as we can. But of course, that adds complexity in the work that we do. And one of the things that we ran into is when that storm hit, it was very concentrated. It happened, a lot of the outages happened in a very small amount of time. It wasn't spread out this past January as it was in February of 2021. And we saw call center volume spike. And there was a disruption to our call center. I immediately, got the call, and we're trying to figure out like what has happened here, because we've put so much automation in, and we have so much that we've invested in. And it turns out, after a few hours of looking at this, our firewalls had detected a denial of service attack. And for those that don't know what a DDoS is, a distributed denial of service attack, it's sometimes you have a bad actor that just pushes a bunch of data into your systems to clog it up. I guess that's kind of the simple way to do it. But our systems detected that because the call volume was so high in such a short period of time.
Okay.
So our systems work the way our security systems work the way they're supposed to. But that is something that we did not anticipate. And that's something that I did not anticipate. So I take ownership and accountability on that. Of course, we do system load testing, but it wasn't in the context of a spike through our firewalls. And so that was one of the greater things that I have learned.
Okay.
The other thing that I sort of learned through that storm is how we communicate with customers. And so if you were to look at our outage map, which is highly scalable because it sits in the cloud, we have these little dots that indicate where an outage is taking place.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had customers that were reporting outages online, and then the dot would kind of show up roughly over their house or wherever the service point was, and then it would disappear. And I think people thought, well, gosh, PG's canceling my outages. But I think, Rolando, being in the utility industry, you might know, it's not that we were canceling the outages. It simply got rolled up to the device that was experiencing the outage. So that might have been a switch. It could have been a substation. But the experience from a customer perspective was that, PG's canceling my outage. And I think that we have since put much better communications in place. But that's another sort of learning for me, is around communications with customers. And there's a lot more that I could talk about
I'm sure.
on the storm. But I would also say that, more broadly, with a wider angle lens in terms of what I've sort of picked up in my time at PGE, I think working with our field crews, being there personally, right, getting out of the proverbial ivory tower, and we're here at the Sherwood Training Center where we train apprentices. It's, one of, I think, 3 in the country where we can train apprentices to become linemen. That has been invaluable. There is no substitute for being in the field with our crews to understand what they go through on a day-to-day basis, and how I can help from a technology perspective as well as a process perspective.
And I'm sure, I think this is, the lesson here. Actually, there are many lessons here, but one of the lessons that I think I want to kind of emphasize, we kind of alluded to this before, is this tendency for analysts and data people and IT people to they're not they're not in the category of executives that let's say that don't connect with their workforce, because IT people just like executives do care about their workforce and they do care about the employees. But I think that at least for me, a lesson is we often train technical people to solve technical problems, and there is and continues to be a disconnect with the people that will be influenced by the solutions that we create, the automations that we create, whether it's AI or we're integrating data or this firewall issue that you guys had. I mean, should there be other rules that could have been included to prevent this from happening? And so it is this a scenario planning and the inclusion component. And I just love this place, by the way, the training facility here. Because it gives an opportunity, not only for the people who are training to be in the field, but quite honestly, I think this is a process that everybody in the workforce should be familiar with.
I 1,000% agree with that, Rolando. And let me kind of, pull the thread on the AI piece of it.
Yep.
In working with our crews, for example, and I give credit to, to leaders on my team that have done that. We try and co-locate people with the individuals that they're serving. So it's not that, the IT team is sitting, in a high, a tower building somewhere in downtown, but we really try and get them out into the field working with the crews. And one of the things, again, part of the greater learning is we have, like all utilities do, car hit poles. And for those that don't know what a car hit pole is look, somebody maybe drives around the corner, they end up hitting a pole, it breaks the pole. You get a de-energization, people lose their power, you experience an outage. There was a stretch of road in Salem, Oregon, which is the capital of our state, where we saw a lot of car hit poles. And so we used the data because one of our line crews said, yeah, there's a lot of car accidents that happen out here. And so we used the data to determine where are the most frequent car hit poles, and then we triangulated that with geography. And it turns out there's a stretch of road in Salem where there were multiple car hit poles every year.
Okay.
And since then, what we've done is we've put these black and yellow placards, just as a warning to the general public to mitigate these accidents or car hit poles that would happen on this stretch of road. And so far, we can see that it's working, knock on wood. And I think that's just a good example of how we're serving members of the public and listening to our line crews as well on what they're seeing and experiencing. And so we take that algorithm and now we can apply it to other parts of our system or the grid to see, well, where are the highest frequencies of outages? And then what is the cause of those outages? And then what preventative mechanisms can we put in? So I'll give you another example. Roughly 50% of the outages in PGE service territory is caused by vegetation, right? And so to simplify it for maybe your listeners, vegetation would be a branch that comes down onto a line, causes a fault, and then you get a de-energization, or a tree falls over. And so we can see, using the data, where the highest concentrations of outages are that are driven by vegetation. Now, you could either, let's say, increase the frequency of vegetation management. That's, for the listeners, that's just, hey, cut back the tree some more, right? So there's not a fall in or grow in risk. Or we could put a covered conductor on there, also known as tree wire. Which means that if a branch falls on it, because it's got its covered conductor, you don't experience a fault on that, right? So those are some of the ways that we've used the data to improve our system for our customers.
Okay, so data to make real actions in the field and in the operations.
Yes.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
As we are coming towards the end of this discussion, can you share with us some perspectives on the future of the utility industry overall, and particularly, in the role that AI will play and that data governance will play?
Yeah, boy, that's a big question, Rolando. I'll start with kind of the future of the electric utility. I think we will continue to see the escalation of electrification in our world. I think part of it is tied to decarbonization and clean energy that I think most of the world really wants. But I also think that economically, it's going to be favorable for things like transportation electrification. I've got an electric vehicle, and I think if you do the math, you'd see that at least from a fueling perspective, it's significantly more economical per mile, right, using an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine. So I think that's going to help escalate it. We talked about AI and the growth of data centers. I think that will continue to drive electrification. And I think that we're in an era right now. I think I saw some data the other day that says that, over the next probably 20 years, we're going to see electrification growth like we haven't seen since probably the 50s and 60s. And I think that's incredibly exciting for all of us in the electric utility industry. It comes with both risks and opportunities, but I'm super excited about the trajectory that we're on. And when I think about sort of the role of artificial intelligence, generative AI, I think it's going to touch every aspect of the work that we do. And it's going to touch every aspect of the customer experience, which, by the way, as electricity prices increase, expectations from customers follow. And I think that the tolerance for outages, the tolerances for the duration of outages are impacted by that. And so that means that we have to make the most efficient and effective investments to keep customer prices affordable while elevating reliability. This goes back to the trilemma that I talked about. I think that's just the expectation now from customers. And I think technology is a way for us to get there. It will also affect, I think, how we run our operations, how we deploy our capital. We want to make sure that we make the best use of the capital and customer dollars to meet all the expectations of that trilemma. So it's, I think there's a lot of excitement ahead for all of us, and we have to operate with a degree of urgency and velocity that we talked about earlier.
That's some phenomenal advice right there in terms of the view that we could adopt, looking into the future. Last question here. You put a lot of emphasis on your people. It's clear by not only the facility, which is amazing, the leadership programs that you have described already, the way that you deploy your workforce closer to where the action happens, so that support can be provided to those that need the support in a more timely fashion. I think that there are so many great indicators in how you're investing in your people to develop them. As we look at the workforce that universities are creating and preparing, and I go to universities, not that is only the only way to create a new workforce, because we certainly can train our own members the new skills. I was in Stanford, just a few days ago, and we were having this discussion. If you look at the U.S. The Department of U.S. Labor and Statistics, a computer science graduate, generally speaking, has a much higher salary, average salary. And and that's compared even to the traditional. I'm an engineer. I studied engineering, and so nothing wrong with that. It's just that when you look at the stats, the computer science, have a much higher salary. And from a utility perspective, I'm having a hard time to reconcile how do we attract and retain talent that will position the utility to continue to be innovative. When you have these sort of limitations of bringing, let's say, the right talent, and yes, you can have an engineer do activities that a computer scientist does, but sometimes, it's like, you want to bring the people that are trained, to do those activities. So you can probably see already what is my struggle. I want to be able to have more diversity of experience and education in the utility industry, but I am not sure that the utility is ready to justify the salaries of some of these professionals that we need. Any thoughts or reflections on that?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why we at PGE have focused on leadership development and training programs. So I mentioned we're here in the Sherwood Training Center. It's one of 3 or 5 in the country where we can develop apprentices to become linemen and this becomes a real inspiration, I think, for young people to come through the facility and say, wow, there's a job that I can do in the trades that compensates quite well, by the way, for those that aren't aware. So I think that's one aspect of it, as we think about sort of line operations, line crews, generation plants. I also think that, as we get into different kinds of jobs in, let's say, IT, I don't know that we're going to have a shortage of IT workers per se, in my opinion. And there's a whole world that we can source from, right? But I do think that from where I'm sitting at least, I want to see more leadership in IT in particular, but I think we need that across the utility industry because all of us in the industry are solving some of the world's toughest energy problems. And I think in order to address that, you need bold leadership, right, to lean into that. And I mentioned that we've not seen the type of electricity growth in many, many decades. And I think we need leaders that can lean into that and who can really push the urgency and the velocity for us to meet the moment for our customers. So where we have programs like the LEAP program I talked about, like the Power Pathways program to get people introduced into technology and to grow their careers, to me, I think that is one of the ingredients for durability for our utility industry.
Got it. So let me reflect on what I think I heard. If let's say those typically higher paid computer scientists want to join the utility, not that they would not be properly compensated, but it's probably not what is going to drive their decision to join the utility. There will be other things that would motivate them to join the utility, number one. And number two, we have tremendous potential within the workforce and the people that we can bring that maybe are not as constrained by the expectations, on just the component, of just making a salary decision alone, to prepare them to be the leaders that we need. And if you had to pick between, someone who is just a data professional and a leader, you will pick a leader anytime.
100%.
Okay, very good. Well, this is bringing us to the end. Let's pick one. What question do you think I can ask my next executive or leader that I interview? And be mindful, I will ask you for your thoughts on the question that you pose for the next leader.
I think I think the question that you should ask for your next leader, who I assume will be in the utility space and will be tied to
yes,
AI and technology, might be, what story do you tell yourself when you look at the challenges ahead for your organization and for the industry?
Okay.
I guess now you're going to ask me to answer that question.
What is your story? What story do you tell yourself?
So, I had a leadership meeting a few years ago, and this had to do with just people's morale and kind of their motivation at the time. And, we were coming out of the pandemic, and talent was tough to get. You remember, unemployment was quite low. And in fact, in the technology worlds, one would argue it was negative, right? Because there were more jobs posted than there were available talent for the technology roles. And I went around and I asked people, I said, hey, look, if you had to rate the company on a scale of 1 to 10, right? 10 being, this is an awesome place, right? And 1 being, oh, this is a terrible place. What would you rate it? And I love the diversity of answers that I got in that. And here's the way to think about it, Rolando, is that I think that all of us here on the podcast, I think any of your listeners would say that I am an 8, 9, 10 talent. I as a leader am an 8, 9, 10 talent. Okay. And so how do you look at your organization? Right? I look at PGE. I think it's an 8-9 company. I show up every day, 8-9 company. I don't want to mess it up. But some people who may be earlier in their careers or perhaps don't have the perspective, they might say, or your listeners might say, oh, my company's a 4, 5, 6 company, right? So my question is, if you're an 8, 9, 10 talent, do you want to work for a 5 company? Chances are probably not. Right. Because 8, 9, 10 people want to work with 8, 9, 10 people. And they want to work with 8, 9, 10 companies. And so how do you as a manager, how do you as a leader show up every day in the work that you do? Are you showing up in a 4, 5, 6 company, or are you showing up in an 8, 9, 10 company? Because your team, you control the weather for your teams. And so I will answer the question that I am proposing for your next leader. As I look at the future for PGE First, I am incredibly bullish. The problems that we have with experiencing the highest load growth in our history, that is a heck of a good problem to have. If you could pick a problem, that's the problem you would pick, right?
Yeah.
And what it means, though, is that we have to re-engage muscles that perhaps we haven't had to engage in decades. But that's an opportunity. That means that we can build our talent, we can recruit new talent to be a model, I think, for how a utility can succeed in this environment. And then as I think about what it means for the industry, right? How do I see kind of the industry? I think, this idea that I mentioned earlier about the electrification growth, that to me, it's happening whether we are participating in it or not, right? I talked about the market and the competitive landscape. Customers will find a way to get what they need. And I think the opportunity for us is to step into it. And this gets into the urgency and the velocity that we, I think, as an industry, can demonstrate more of. And that's what we're trying to do at PGE.
Wow, John, if I say anything else and I add anything else, I think I will mess this podcast up. So with that, we are at the end, and I am so appreciative of your time, generosity of your time, bringing us to this beautiful facility. I will get to visit with John Farmer in a few moments here and explore a little more and maybe share some of this with the audience as well. Again, thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Rolando. And, like I said, I feel like I'm an 8, 9, 10 talent. I would only do this with another 8, 9, 10 talent. And I'm excited for the work that you and your team are doing going forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.